Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Clubo. Today we will make this charm square gift sack. The house on the front is pieced from scraps, and the sack is created from 6 5-inch charm squares. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. This is another foundation piece project. I have started off with this sort of a house shape, which I will describe for you later on in the video. This is a 1.5-inch square for the door of the house that I've pinned to the foundation with the bottom edge, even with the edge of the foundation. Now this is really a scrap project. I will take a green scrap and I'm going to do the 2 sides here. It doesn't have to be precise. I'm just going to pin that right there, and I'm going to use white thread with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and stitch right up over that red square. This doesn't have to be perfect. I've got my Bernina and my iron. Then I'll trim this off. Of course, I always trim it big. And then I'll sew the other side. That looks good. And now I will trim this piece. Don't need that. And then before I move on to the next scrap, I'm going to go ahead and do my embroidery. I'm going to do a feather stitch down both sides of the door. Now I'm going to add a green strip above the door, like this, just a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and it'll fold up like this. That looks good. The only thing that really matters is the door right now, because I can trim all the rest. Trimming out around the foundation, just to be sure that everything is relatively symmetric, is that the word? Now I'm going to do a kind of a heavy zigzag along the bottom edge of this green. Now I have a red scrap for the roof. I'd like about 1/2 inch of this green strip to show. So I'm going to set this red edge about here. I hope that makes sense. Maybe it makes better sense this way. Here's where the angle starts to go in. So if this is the angle, this seam will be a little bit above the angle, about 1/4 inch above the angle. There's about 1 inch showing right here. And I'm just going to go straight across. This does not have to be perfect. Now I have a stitch, it's sort of a scallop stitch, and I'm going to do 3 rows of the scallops along the roof. There's the first row. There's the second row. And the little patchwork house is essentially done. I'll trim it out a little bit closer to the foundation. Now there are a lot of fun things you can do with your completed house. Today, I kind of drafted this to fit in the center of a 5-inch charm square. I'm going to center it, but a little bit closer to the top. We're going to make a gift sack, and since I'm going to box out the corners of the gift sack, we need a little bit of extra there so that it'll sit flat. So I'm going to move it a little bit closer and kind of try to center it here and here, just with my eye. I'm going to pin it and I'm going to just zigzag around the entire edge. It looks a little bit crooked, but I don't think it's going to matter. To complete the sack, we'll need 6 charm squares, 6 5-inch squares. I'm going to use red for the cuff and white for the lining. So I'm going to sew these in sequence with the white print and then the red and then the lining. I'll press the seams open. Now right sides together, I'm going to match up these seams and sew around the edges. There we go. I'm going to sew around the outside edge, leaving an opening here for turning. I'm just going to do 1/4 inch all the way around. Before I turn it right side out, I'm going to box off these corners. First, I'll trim the little triangle points off. And then it kind of helps to reach inside. I'm going to fold out the corners like this and flatten out the seam allowances on both sides. I hope you can see that. This and this. I'm going to pin the seam allowances, but I'm actually sewing 1 inch up from the point. So I'm actually sewing right here. Bloop. Maybe 3/4 inch. And then I'll trim that. It's not much to trim. And then the same thing for the opposite corner. I'll show you again. Just fold it like this. Pin the seam allowances. It's nice to have them flat. And then stitch across like this, about 3/4 inch up from the point. Then I'm going to repeat for the corners in the lining. All 4 of my corners are done, so I'm going to turn the bag to the right side. So here's how it looks when it's turned right side out. And now I'm going to sew up the opening in the bottom of the lining. I'm just going to top stitch it. I just top stitched the opening closed. It doesn't have to look really neat and perfect because it'll be way inside the bag. So now I'm tucking the lining inside the bag. And if you were wondering how this was all going to work out, when I said that you just needed 6 charm squares and you could make a gift sack, this is how it works. You just tuck it inside, fold it down at the top of the, or actually at the center of the cuff piece. Fold it all the way down. I can feel that my lining is all the way down into the corners of the bag. That's good. And I'll use my iron one more time to press the top of the cuff so that I get a nice crease there. And the last thing to do is to sew a casing for the drawstring. I'm going to put the drawstring right at the top. You could also put it here, which is good, but it kind of distorts the applique, and also there are a lot of seam allowances in there, so it gets a little tricky. So I'm just going to put it at the top, which means that I have to switch to red thread. Also, I'm done with my iron, so I'm going to move it. I'm going to place a couple of pins along the top of the cuff just to hold the layers together so they don't shift. And I'll be sewing my casing I would say a generous 1/4 of an inch, not all the way to a 1/2 an inch, but a generous 1/4 of an inch all the way around. And I'm going to sew from the inside. So I'll put my presser foot right here and sew from the inside. I find it a little bit easier. There's my casing. Now for a drawstring, I'm going to use this green, I think it's 1/16 inch satin ribbon. I'm just gonna, this is a very dull needle. I'm going to, I forgot what kind of needle this is called. So I'm inside the casing now. It takes a second to get the actual ribbon to start. And then, you know, when I approach this second side where the seam allowance is, I want to make sure I don't get hung up in that seam allowance and just work it back around. And then I'm going to exit with a blunt tip right in the center on the other side of the seam, right here. We'll leave those nice and long. I like them to be this long as the bag. So we'll cut that off and tie it in an overhand knot. Nice. Then we'll do a second drawstring in the opposite direction. This is about a yard of ribbon each time, so a total of 2 yards. All right, so this time I'll start on this side, making sure I'm inside the casing and working it through all the way around. You don't need to exit at the opposite seam. Just keep going around the top and then exit again. Move this out of the way. In the center, so in between the seam and the fold, and on the other side of the sewn seam. And just pull it through. Doing the drawstrings this way gives you a nice tight close. Then I'll tie these ends in an overhand knot. It's really very satisfying to pull it closed because it stays and it shows the applique. Now I've got a couple of fun ways to finish this. I have a fabric like this is really fun with these little characters. I like to use this one, this little peppermint candy, and I'm going to cut that out really close to the edge. You don't have to have this exact fabric. Just look around in your scraps and your stash and find something with little small motifs. I like to put that right there above the door. And then on one side, there's a snowman, a Santa, a reindeer, and here's Mrs. Claus. I've never used Mrs. Claus, so maybe I'll try this one. She's really cute. I don't have to get it exactly on the edge. I can put Mrs. Claus here. And then there's a gift or a reindeer. Oh, the gingerbread character is really cute. I think I'll use that one. Or I could just do Santa. That would be cute. Classic, Mr. and Mrs. Oh, there's a choo-choo train. What if I did Mrs. Claus on this side and the choo-choo train on the other side? That'd be great. What do you think? Now for the door, I like to put a little handle there. Sometimes I'll do a button or just a little French knot. I have a bead, but it's black. Oops. I think it might be too big. We could try that. I have this little lace. I think if I cut one of these little flowers from this lace, it would be just right. It would be really cute. That's what I'm going to do. All right. I just use Aleene's Tacky glue to secure these final items. It's easy. It works. And I feel like it's pretty secure. So for instance, I'm using the card because I'll squeeze out a little bit of glue, and then I'm going to spread the glue all the way out to the edges of each of these little pieces. There's a generous coating of glue. And then Mrs. Claus will go here. And then the peppermint. I think of this one as kind of like a little window above the door. Lots of glue. And then the little choo-choo train. If you start looking in your stash for little figures and characters and words, toys, I have one with elves, gnomes. There's all kinds of fun little things you can add to the front of your house. That looks good. Here's another one. This one has a Santa and a little gift, and I sewed a button on. That's the smallest button I could find. Here is how to make the pattern, the foundation pattern for the house. This is a 3-inch square. Every one of these little squares is graph paper, so each one of these squares is 1/4 inch. So I just count up 7 squares, which is 1 3/4 inches. And then from here, it's 2.5 squares. And just cut from here to here. And there we go. There's the pattern, nothing to it. And then the door is a 1.5 inch square. So I can't find it right now, but just 1.5 inch square. So it's just 6 by 6. Easy. Here are 2 examples of the project. They're just a little bit different fabrics. I use this kind of thick baker's twine for the drawstring, but it's kind of a disaster. The ribbon was a lot better. And then this one has a Santa Claus and a gift. And this one is Mrs. Claus and a little choo-choo train. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.